My name is Kemini Amano. The MC's already mentioned. I just thought it wise to reintroduce myself. I fearlessly ask questions for a living. In the world full of labels, I'm called a journalist, a label I proudly wear. If you're looking for me, you'll find me on TV3. But this moment is about Chairman Alex APAU Dadey, who himself has 30 years of corporate life under his belt, having worked in the US, the UK, and the Middle East, and now here in Africa, building his own business from the ground. Congratulations on your awards today.
Thank you.
Let's start off our conversation today with what your experience has been venturing into private-public partnerships. What would you consider the things that make such partnerships a success?
Thanks, Kemi. I get quite nervous when I see champions of industry in that big brains here, because these are the backbone of our economy. So to have a room full of them, it's quite nerve-wracking. So thank you for having me here. First of all, I hold a belief that governments do not create wealth, the private sector does. And as such, enabling the private sector through incentives and enabling an environment is the surest way to create wealth. Having said that, in terms of public-private partnership, I have been doing this for the past 35 years, 25 of them from a base of the United Kingdom, working across 20 countries. Ghana was one of the countries we worked in, so I know the Ghanaian market very well. We founded some of the top companies in Ghana in those days. One of them was GNTC, which was one of the largest trading company. They own Coca-Cola, other subsidiaries. We funded them from a base in the United Kingdom. So I'm not new to public-private partnership, and I'm also not new to the economic cycles of these, especially when we funded the likes of GMPC, Cocoa Board we funded by partnering Ghana International Bank in the UK and that. So throughout most of these cycles, I know how the economic cycle also plays on this. But let's talk about our recent involvement in public-private partnership. I also make the point that the principles of enterprise is the same whether it's public or private. It doesn't change. Unfortunately for us, the application of these principles, and especially public organizations, is very lacking. What are some of these principles? Some of these principles are leadership, not just leadership, but transformational leadership. When you talk about integrity, you talk about funding, you talk about sustainability, you talk about resilience, you talk about compliance. These are lacking. Most importantly, public organizations, usually, not only public organizations, some private sector organizations also do, but not much compared to public. Public organizations are not designed to compete in the marketplace. You've got people like myself and most of the private sector people filled up in this room who have so much experience, 35 experience in the corporate sector myself. So imagine being pitched against a public sector leader, CEO, with little or no experience at all. They'll find wanting. So these are some of the issues that you have in the public sector. That is why in partnering with the private sector, you tend to get a bit more mileage.
So if I get you correctly, you're saying that sometimes there is a mismatch in the quality you're getting from the public sector. How have you had to deal with that in some of the partnerships that you have engaged in?
I think one of the things that is also being introduced in the public sector, when you face off, we talk about public-private partnerships. We forget that one thing that has been also introduced in the public sector is political service. So you've got political servants in the last probably 30 or 40 years We have introduced political servants with less experience, and these are people that we need to equip, or they are not well equipped to deal with the complexities of enterprise and business through no fault of theirs, because we throw them in the deep sea to swim. When you look at the structure of public service, I look at civil servants. The political servants who go into the civil service are backed by very experienced civil servants. You've got the chief directors, you've got people who have been there for years with a lot of experience. But when we throw in these political servants, as I call them, to head organizations, some of these organizations are, like I said, the principles and characteristics of business, doesn't matter whether it's public or private. So some of these organizations are organizations that are huge, multi-million or multi-billion-dollar organizations. And in the private sector, before you go on to head some of these organizations, you find out that you need experience sometimes to head maybe $10 million organizations. You probably need 10 years experience to head, certainly to head a billion-dollar organization in the private sector. You probably need 20 years experience to be a CEO. That would be part of what is required of you. So if we're going to go that route, we have to equip them properly, because a CEO, unlike a minister, doesn't have that support. They are thrown in, there's no support at all. You have to run the whole organization.
Right. So let's draw in a bit on your experience. We know that you have entered into 2 key partnerships with the public sector. Your digitalization for NLA lotteries, and then also automation of premix field distribution. Talk to us about what you thought made those partnerships a success. How did you leverage technology to be able to achieve that level of success?
I mean, when I take NLA, for example, we came in at a time that it wasn't doing well. The solutions they were proffering were solutions that would work, because NLA approached us not for digitalization, to fund their kiosk program. And we thought that this was a dying program. So you could tell that the vision, they had even misunderstood what was required of them. They were expanding, they were against technology, basically. So we came in and said, look, we could transform the fortunes of NLA with technology. I don't think anyone believed that, because in Ghana, the lottery sector, certainly when I was growing up, was an area, I would say, reserved for drunkards and people. I mean, it was for the low class, basically, in society. So you see people standing around the kiosk. So no one thought, including myself, even when we started, that we could digitalize it. But we invested quite a bit of money into it. We put in the technology to drive that, and we've made a success out of that. Not only have we made a success out of it, we happen to be the largest digital lottery operator in Africa. When we started with the NLA, our revenue in Ghana accounted for about 90%. Now our revenue in Ghana accounts for about 30-40% of what we do. We are the largest also digital provider for Ivory Coast in Nigeria, 6 other African countries, negotiating now with Kenya and Namibia and 3 other countries. So from a base of Ghana, we have expanded so much into Africa.
And when you started here in Ghana, they didn't believe you could do it. Is that correct?
No one believed that it could be done. So no one wanted to put any money in. Our relationship with NLA is based on just basically, okay, you can do it. NLA are regulators as well as operators, so you get a license, go and do it, and give us some of the revenue that comes out. We want a fixed revenue because we don't think it's going to work. So we started off mentioning figures. We started off with 0, and we were supposed to pay them a license fee of $6 million, which we did the first 2 months. I think we made 62,000 cedis. So that's from the low base that we started this.
So essentially that partnership has made the NLA more profitable.
It has. And what it has also helped them with is the cutting out all the illegal operation, because technology has a way of transforming these sectors. So instead of setting up lotto courts and that, they don't do that anymore because technology has solved most of those issues.
And then there is also the project with the automation of premix fuel distribution. Tell us about that story and what we could learn from that partnership.
With the premix, it's the same thing. We came in with the premix sector, which had a lot of corruption. Governments were subsidizing that sector to the value of about $40 million a year, and it was going to waste, basically. The government had tried funding this for the automation of the sector. Didn't have the technology, didn't have the money. So what do? What we have is we come in with the technology, we come in also with the funding. So they approached us that, look, we need to do this project, but we don't have the money and we don't have the technology. You have the technology. In driving PPPs, what we do also is we bring in other partners, because most of these ones you can't do alone. When I go back to the PPP of the lottery sector, for example, we've worked closely with MTN. We are the largest, we hold the largest customer data in the country. The largest bank, I believe, holds about 400. We hold 7 million. Across the areas that we work, we hold about 50 million. That's Cote d'Ivoire and all that. We hold huge customer data. And we also, I'm just veering off a bit, in terms of the technology that we deploy. Sometimes you come in, we've worked closely, like I said, with the telcos, especially MTN, to upgrade systems that can take that load, and the technology that is deployed, bearing in mind that the technology that is deployed in Africa is not the same technology that's deployed outside. So they are proprietary systems that we use. Coming back to the premix sector as well, it's the same thing that we've done. We bring in also local players, because these are construction, not only technology, they are construction involved, so we have to bring in experts in construction. We're constructing 300 premix stations, we're automating them, and like I said, the government didn't have money, so how do they pay for this? They pay for this by basically the savings that they make from the corruption, savings from the corruption over a period of 10 years. So we spread the cost over 10 years. I don't think there are a lot of companies that would be prepared to wait for 10 years for their money, and also when the money is not guaranteed by government, but it is through surcharge debits or a build up on the fuel price for the fisher folks.
It would sound like the public sector needs the PPPs a lot more, but much more than who will benefit most from PPPs. Tell us how significant it is for the private sector, the public sector to collaborate in order to ensure continuous economic growth.
I think, like I said before, the public sector really is not structured to get into this. I think the president asked the question once, right, that how can GIHOG sell alcohol and make losses? And you ask the question, how can anyone deal in lottery and make losses? But NLA was for years not paying winnings and that. So is GIHOG. So the answer to the president is maybe you sell GIHOG or franchise it to Casapreco or some of those private sector operators, and they will turn it into profitable ventures. And if you look at the structure also of these public service organizations, in most organizations, commercial organizations, one of the things that you find out with these public sector ones is that their wage bills are very high, very high. Because if you look at KGL Group's wage structure or the wage bill as a percentage of revenue or profit, it's about between 15 and 25%. Compared to NLA, it's about 90%. How can you run, and it's across all public sector organizations. I think the Minister of Finance or Mr. Sekpepe is here. He will probably tell us that 70% plus of the receipts goes into compensation, and that you cannot run any organization if 70% of your income goes into compensation, because you have to make room for research and development, which we are doing. The technology that we are deploying at NLA today is not the technology that will be deployed tomorrow. So we are aware of that. You might have an agreement with them for 10 years or whatever it is. Forget about that agreement. Anyone who has the next technology, right, will be the one who will be running it. And that's to answer your question about these savings and that. They don't have enough money to do any investment at all. Public sector organizations don't. So
it's important for the government to make it easier for the private sector to want to collaborate with the public sector.
Yes.
But you know, having been through the experience already, the journey of a PPP, 2 of them, you say, what can the government do to make it easier for private sector who are gathered here to find PPPs an important outlet for their investments?
I think the government would have to, there should be that willpower. They would basically want to do it, because some of these things, like I look at some of these organizations, right, they are just avenues of creating employment rather than fulfilling their mission, why they were created. NLA was created to raise funding and also good causes and that, but they are not. So the government should be prepared to go back to the table and say, look, this is the reason why we created these public sector organizations, and we believe that they can partner the private sector to do better.
Part of the private sector will reside outside the country, and you are a very devoted advocate of diaspora and engagement for economic development. We also have, on the other hand, a government that is hoping to run a 24-hour economy. And if we want to expand, then businesses like those seated here and those outside the country who hope to bring in their money will be very crucial to that development. So let's talk about diaspora and engagement and its importance to our bid for economic expansion via the 24-hour economy. What are the opportunities available for diasporans? You yourself, a diasporan who returned, talk to us about that journey.
Diasporan issues are very, very close to my heart. A lot of the enterprises in Africa and other parts of the world is being powered by diasporans. We have always advocated for diasporan inclusion. One of the things that I have done in the last 25 years was Ghana had these laws on their books, and we have been trying to get those amended. We've been successful at amending the constitution to get diasporans included in certain aspects of our socio-political life. Because before, when you were a diasporan, you couldn't vote, you weren't even allowed to be a dual citizen. We fought for that, engaged government. I think it was during Kufuor's time that was amended, because you cannot exclude one of the greatest assets that you have, the diasporans. And if I put it in terms of financial, the diasporans contribute unofficially. I think they bring in something like about $8 billion in remittances and other things, right? And FDI, because I chaired GIPC board. I was on the board for 8 years, and we could hardly bring in $2 billion of FDI. But these diasporans were bringing in unofficially or officially about $4 to $5 billion
in remittances.
In remittances, not only in remittances, because when you talked about what can the government do in terms of the diaspora, The diaspora is not a homogeneous group. They are different. They need different things. Their needs are different. I categorize the investment they bring into about 4 main areas. There's the remittances, which helps local communities and grandfathers and that. Then there is diaspora direct investment. People like myself who have come from the diaspora invested directly into the economy by establishing companies and that. Then there's also the diaspora portfolio investor who sits in London, New York, Germany, and sends money to invest in portfolio items like bonds and that. Then also there's the philanthropic investor who sends money for the local community, building schools and that. In order to bring all these diasporans back home, you don't have to come back home, but you have to engage in economic activity back home, is the government has to create a policy, a diaspora engagement policy, to look at how we can attract these diasporans in back home.
Let's give you your last word then on the diaspora. Top 3 lessons that you think that business people, investors in the diaspora, in the local economic community could learn from your journey so far as a business owner who started from scratch, a wholly owned Ghanaian business, and having done these public PPPs, successful ones at that. Top 3 lessons.
I am a living example of how well a diasporan could do in Ghana. Having said that, not be sounding too arrogant, I worked at the highest level in London. When I say the highest level, I mean I was probably one of the 1% high earners in the United Kingdom. And my message when I go out to the diasporans, because sometimes you get whether it's political or business leaders come here and trying to attract them, those who earn some good money will turn around and say, oh, why do we go back home? I work in the city of London, Wall Street and that. But I'm a living example of someone who earned back, and I always make the story. I tell them that it is better in Ghana than it is where we've been. And lastly, so that is one reason why you should come. The opportunities are immense. The opportunities, so are the challenges. But we've gone through those challenges. The buses, there are no buses to run on time, the electricity and that. But this is Ghana, huge opportunities. And any diaspora listening to that, I would say, look at what I've been able to create here and come join us in Ghana.
Huge opportunities, he says. Thank you so much for talking to us.